Alright, this video is to help you to prepare your materials so that you can do your weaving. You'll notice that this piece of paper that I have begun weaving with is 16 strips wide, and it's going to have 16 strips coming down to the bottom. I've given myself this space up top where the strips stay connected. I also have here a loose batch of strips. So you want to create the loose strips as well as the strips that stay connected. So I'm going to show you how to do both of those. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to start by showing you how to create the strips that stay connected. You can see I've got my ruler here. I have another video that shows you how to create a ruler if you don't have one at home. So we're going to measure for our 16 by 16 purposes. You will want to measure on your ruler half-inch marks. So that's making a mark at the half-inch, then at the inch, then at the 1.5 inch, and so forth, all the way across. Here's a common mistake that students make. First of all, I want to make sure that I set the edge of my ruler at the edge of my paper. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead on this piece. So if you're making the 16 by 16, you'll want to do half-inch marks. If you're making the 8 by 8, I recommend just whole inch marks all the way across the paper. So I'm going to make my half-inch marks here. As I said, you want to make sure you do this all the way across the page. You will end up, if your sheet of paper is a standard size piece of copy paper, which is what I'm working with, you'll end up with more than 16 strips. And if you would like to cut off that extra, feel free to do that. That's not a problem. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit now. And what I want to show you is a lot of times students will begin their work with the piece of paper kind of as it is. They've got these marks. They'll start to draw their lines across the paper. And the mistake that happens there is your strips will be random widths. They won't be parallel all the way across. So you can see these strips that I have made, no matter where I'm looking, they're the same width all the way across. And that's really important with your weaving if you want it to look like your digital design. So the tip is to make another set of marks on the opposite, somewhere on the opposite side of the paper. Now, the other thing that's important is to make sure you measure from the same side. So I started on this side of my paper. When I began, I want to start on that same side again. So I'm going to make those marks. Just going to make a few. I would obviously do that all the way across the paper, and then I'm going to use my ruler to connect those two lines. So it's important that you take a moment, just make sure that your ruler is touching that mark and your other mark, and then make that line all the way across your paper. I'm going to do that just a few more times just to kind of give you the idea. So I'm checking to make sure that it's touching this mark, looking at the other one, and then making that mark all the way across my paper. If you do that, you should end up with nice even strips that you can then cut, which really helps you to make your weaving nice and precise. So this paper that I'm working on here obviously is where we would cut the strips all the way across. If you're trying to figure out where to make the mark, just to show you again, so where to make the mark that shows you where to stop cutting for these strips, this mark here, I'm going to show you that now. And the basic thing that you need to know is you just need to measure how wide your piece of paper is. So I'm going to use my ruler. It looks like my paper here is about 8.5 inches wide. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this paper sideways, and I'm going to make marks. So I've set my ruler now at 8.5 inches. I'm just going to make a mark here at 8.5 inches. I'm going to make that same mark on the other side of my paper so that I get a nice square line here. so that my line doesn't go off at an angle. And then I'm going to connect those two spaces. So now if this is the piece of paper for my strips that are going to stay connected at the top, you can see that when I cut, I'm going to stop at this line. That way I leave myself that space at the top, which will make it easier to do my weaving. If you have all loose strips, you'll find that your work is going to be much more difficult, more complicated. So that is what I would recommend for doing your 16 by 16 squares, and that's the basics on how to set up your paper so that you can create a weaving just like this. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.